What's up, the kitchen? It is Dr. Frank here, the Pickleball PT, with part 1 of the Play Better, Hurt Less series. And today we're going to be discussing the importance of an active warm-up, something that's very overlooked, especially in the patients that I've had the opportunity of working with who have suffered injuries that could have been prevented if they had taken part in an active warm-up prior to playing. And it's something that I want to share with you guys. It's a very, very, very important step that not only prevents your injury risk from being as high, but it also improves your performance out there on the court as well. So I just want to let everybody know that I have put together an outline of this presentation. If you want this outline, you can feel free to send me a message of your email, and I will be happy to send it to you. It's just kind of a rough guideline of everything that I'm going to be discussing today, and I'll be happy to share that information with anybody who requests it. So that being said, let's go ahead and get started. So the first thing I want to go over is exactly what an active warm-up is. So growing up playing sports, myself included, when we warmed up, we thought about doing things like maybe going on a brief jog or a bike ride and then spending some time stretching. Sometimes that time stretching was upwards of 15, 20, sometimes even 30 minutes before we actually started playing. And that time stretching, it's a good thing, don't get me wrong, but in order to prepare for competition and get ready to get out there and play and move like you have to do when you're out there on the pickleball courts and you're really getting serious about it, there's another step that you have to take. And that time stretching has actually been shown to kind of cool the body down because you're not really moving much. And that actually sometimes has a detrimental effect and increases your risk for particular injuries. So an active warm-up is something that sort of is a low-level, low-intensity, continuous movement sort of thing, performing movements and activities that you would perform out there on the pickleball court. So they mimic the movements that you're going to be doing when you're out there to kind of get your body in terms of your muscles and your joints ready for those sort of movements when you're out there on the court, so you don't kind of end up surprising your body and doing something, moving in a certain way that causes something to happen like a muscle strain or a ligament strain or something to kind of go wrong that you obviously don't want to happen. So that includes things from the neck through the shoulders, elbows and wrists, through the spine, hips, knees, ankles, and feet as well. You have to get all those areas incorporated in this active warm-up in order to really make it as effective as possible and minimize your injury risk as much as possible while also increasing your performance as much as possible. So there are a few key things as far as points that I wanted to mention as to why an active warm-up is so important. So the first one is, the first four, I'm going to go through how it improves your performance first, and then I'll go through how it reduces your injury risk after that. So as far as improved performance, the first big key is that it increases your body temperature by performing an active warm-up. And this kind of signals your body that you're getting ready for a more intense activity. It's the literal definition of a warm-up. It gets your body ready to go for whatever it is that you're about to do. In this particular case, it is pickleball. So those constant repetitive movements warms up the body and really is a signal to it that, you know, it's about to go down. We're about to get out there and play. So the second one is that it increases your blood flow, and by doing that, it increases the oxygen delivery to your tissues. So you've heard people say you don't want to get out there and play cold. It's very true. You want to get some blood flow going throughout your body to all the different areas that you're going to be using so that those muscles are ready to go. And the blood flow comes with the oxygen delivery. So that not only gets your muscles ready to move, but it increases your strength and endurance as well, because that oxygen is already being delivered to you from the get-go right when you start playing, and it doesn't take you that time to warm up to kind of, you know, a lot of people I've heard say when they get out there, they just feel stiff. They don't feel quite at their maximum performance level from the very beginning. But an active warm-up will help you achieve that level much, much quicker, if not from the very first serve of the very first game. So you've got increased body temperature and increased blood flow and oxygenation, which helps the muscles and the joints overall perform better. And then you have increased mobility through the joints by doing the particular movements that are involved in your active warm-up. And that increased mobility through the joints minimizes stiffness and just makes you move a lot quicker and a lot more efficiently and deliberately when you're out there on the court. And the fourth point for improved performance is and this is perhaps the biggest one, it improves the communication between your brain through the nerves to all of those tissues that you're going to be using. So it improves your coordination, it improves your proprioception, it increases your reaction time, all things that are often overlooked, but very, very important when you're out there on the pickleball court. Because if you're playing with some high-level players, you know how quickly things go. And the quicker you have the ability to react to certain plays and where the ball is going and get there before you otherwise would have been able to, then you're just a step ahead of your competition. So I'll break that down again with a quick synopsis. For improving performance, an active warm-up increases your body temperature, it increases the blood flow and oxygenation to your muscles, it improves the mobility through your joints, and it improves your brain's ability to send those signals through your nerves to all the different parts of the body that you're going to be using, which helps with reaction time and speed and all that sort of stuff. So those are the breakdowns of how an active warm-up can help improve your performance out there on the court. And now I'm going to get into how it can reduce your injury risk, which I'm sure a lot of you tuned in for. So the first thing is it increases your soft tissue mobility. So the soft tissue is your muscle tissues, your ligaments, tendons, all those sort of things that are obviously moving a bunch when you're out there on the court. The more mobility you have through those tissues, obviously the less likely you'll have the chance to have something happen like a pulled muscle or a tear, tendonitis developing from too much tension where those tendons attach to the bones. All those sort of things can be curbed and prevented by having that increased elasticity and mobility through those muscle tissues, which is something that is much more effectively achieved through an active warm-up than through obviously no warm-up at all or a static stretching routine. The second benefit as far as reduced injury risk from an active warm-up is increased joint mobility. So stiff joints obviously is something that none of us want to have when we're out there on the court. Those that play early in the morning tend to experience this more. Those that play in colder temperatures also tend to experience this more. That much more important to participate in an active warm-up 5 to 10 minutes before you play to get those joints loosened up, get that mobility improved so that your movements, when you decide to make them, your body will cooperate and you won't have the most common thing with stiff joints is sprains of ligaments that stabilize those joints. If those joints are not moving right, then there's excessive stress placed on the ligaments and something can go wrong there. ACL tears you've heard of, ankle sprains you've heard of, rotator cuff sprains, strains through the neck and spine. All those things can be avoided through a very effective and comprehensive active warm-up. The third thing, as far as reduced injury risk goes, it increases your proprioceptive feedback. So that's not a term that a lot of people are familiar with. Proprioception is essentially your body's ability to recognize where it's moving in space. So if I'm raising my arm up or I'm taking a lunge to one side or I'm spinning around or whatever the movement might be, there is actually mechanisms in your body that tell your brain where you're moving and how you're moving as you're going through that movement. And this is where things like repetition and repetition and repetition come in handy. And the more you repeat those sort of movements, the better your body is going to be at performing them properly the way you want to perform them. But an active warm-up stimulates these proprioceptive mechanisms to fire more effectively, and it gives your body that feedback at a better, more efficient rate to prevent you from stumbling when you're making those movements or reaching in a way that puts your body at a compromised position and makes your movements a lot more effective and deliberate and more intentional to the way that you plan them out in your head to go. And sometimes you think, okay, this is what I'm going to do, and it just doesn't end up that way. An active warm-up can help reduce those situations from happening, whether it be with a shot that you meant to hit or a way that you meant to move. And the fourth thing with reducing injury risk is, again, it increases that body temperature and blood flow. This applies to injury risk as well because you're at a decreased risk for all the different types of soft tissue injuries, from pulled muscles to sprains in your ligaments to tears and things, and all the way down to tendonitis and plantar fasciitis and all that sort of stuff. That blood flow and the increased temperature to those tissues is gonna really reduce your risk for those sort of injuries happening. So as far as reduced injury risk goes, the 4 major points: you've got increased soft tissue mobility, you have increased mobility through your joints, you have the increased proprioceptive feedback of your body recognizing where it's moving in space, and you have the increased temperature through all the tissues that decreases the risk of all sorts of soft tissue injuries as well. So after all of those points have been discussed, you may be asking, what does an active warm-up actually look like? So like I mentioned at the very beginning, it's a combination of lower intensity movements. So similar to what you're going to be performing out there on the pickleball court, you can think a lateral lunge, an overhead reach, kind of a forehand and a backhand movements, all of those things. You can get creative with them too. You can think about movements that you perform out there on the pickleball court on a regular basis and literally just do those same movements, but nowhere near as fast or as intense as you would do them out there on the pickleball court. And that can be your active warm-up. It doesn't have to be a series of specific things. It can be whatever you want it to be, as long as it incorporates the spine and the shoulders and the elbows and the wrists and the hips and the knees and the ankles and the feet. All of those things are involved in playing, so you want to make sure you address all of them before you actually get out there and play. One thing I'm going to do for every one of these presentations that I do every month for the Play Better, Hurt Less series, it's going to be about a particular topic. And I'm going to put together a video that kind of simulates my recommendations when I go through everything. So later next week, I'm going to be having a video put together that I'm going to post into the kitchen with an active warm-up that I do prior to playing. And it incorporates all of those things, and it's not very aggressive or intense. It doesn't take long. It takes me about 5 minutes. But I will say that when I started doing this warm-up, it made a big difference, not only in how I felt, but how I played on the court. And that kind of just reaffirmed everything that I'm explaining to you guys. So y'all can look forward to that in 5 to 7 days, something like that. I'm going out of town over the next couple of days, but when I get back, I'll have that put together and sent out to you guys. I'll just post it in the kitchen for everybody to see. But those are the key things with an active warm-up. I don't have room to demonstrate one in my small little workout room / office at my house right now. But anybody that has any questions, feel free to shoot them my way, and I will be happy to address any questions that you guys might have. And like I said at the very beginning, if you missed it, I have an outline of all of those points that I put together. If you would like that outline, you can just message me with your email address or let me know through the comments, and I will send a message to you, and I'll get that outline to you guys as well. Any questions from anyone? If anybody happens to watch this and thinks of any questions, they can also feel free to just type it in the comment section later at a different time. And I'll always, of course, come back and check it and see what anybody says and address the questions at that time as well. All right, Brian, absolutely. So plantar fasciitis, one of the more common conditions in pickleball, especially that I've worked with players for. It's something that develops over time, likely due to a variety of different things, ranging from weakness and limited mobility through the hips, all the way down through the knees and the feet, stiff joints in the ankles, tight calves, the way you walk, run, and move when you're out there on the court, also contributing factors. But as far as helping with plantar fasciitis immediately when you're out there on the court right before you play, a really good way to loosen up that tissue and break it up is using, I wouldn't recommend a pickleball because you would probably just crush it and smash it, But using something like a tennis ball or something firm and hard, a baseball or a golf ball or something like that, and just rolling your foot on top of it from the heel of the foot all the way through to the balls of the feet, and take your foot and just roll it on top of it, and you'll feel initially a lot of irritation, discomfort, likely even pain if the tissue is inflamed. But the more you roll on top of that firm surface and the more the tissue gets broken up, the less pain and the less intensity of the sensation you will feel, and you'll know that that plantar fascia is getting mobilized. And then after you mobilize the tissue, a good idea is to stretch your calves out. You've seen people leaning up on the fence, leaning into a calf stretch, or you can get like a towel or something and pull back on your toes to stretch the calf out as well. There are a variety of different ways to stretch your calves, but mobilizing the plantar fascia tissue through rolling your foot on a hard surface like a tennis ball or a baseball or a golf ball, and then stretching your calves after that right before you play is a good way to get that tissue loosened up and warmed up and ready to go. And then doing things like calf raises, where you're just kind of going up on your toes and coming back down and up and down and up and down to get the calf tissues and the tissues through the bottom of your feet warmed up and ready to move around, is the third step to that process to really get your lower legs and feet ready to go. Absolutely, Rick. I'm happy to help any way I can. As far as the elbow, so you're probably talking about the infamous pickleball elbow. Actually similar to the plantar fascia. If you can use something firm like a tennis ball or a golf ball to roll around in the area where you're having the tenderness, if the tissue is inflamed, initially you're going to feel some discomfort there, but roll it around until that tissue starts to break up. And then literally a lot of people are kind of thrown off about what causes that tightness through the elbow, but this tissue actually, it originates at your elbow and then it runs all the way down through your wrist and into your hand. So the more common cause of pickleball elbow and tennis elbow, if it is true tennis elbow and lateral epicondylitis, is limitations in mobility at the wrist. And the more limited you are at the wrist, the more strain you're going to have to put in this tissue to perform movements like you would for a backhand. So if the wrist is not moving well, then this tissue is going to have to pull extra hard to generate that movement, and then it gets inflamed where it attaches at the elbow there. So improving the wrist mobility into extension is one of the best ways to prevent and alleviate tightness and inflammation at the elbow area here. So a lot of stretching into extension, stretching into flexion helps as well to actually stretch that tissue out. And then mobilizing the tissue, like I said, with a golf ball or a tennis ball, and then just going through simple movements like this. It doesn't have to be anything more than that. You can even do it with the paddle in your hand to mimic actually how you're actually gripping the paddle and moving your wrist at that point to make it even more sport specific. And that would be probably the ideal way to do it. So mobilize the tissue, stretch the tissue, stretch the wrist out, and then mimic that wrist flexion extension movement with the paddle in your hand at a low intensity. Like I said, low intensity is key for the active warm-up. Very low intensity, but similar to the movements that you're going to be doing when you're out there on the court as much as possible. All right, Sally, let's see. Almost always warm up before playing, stiffening up with the tournaments in between games. So staying loose between games is a whole different ball game, but thank you for your question, first of all. Having something portable like a hand roller, even if you have just a simple, the rolling pins like people have in their kitchens to roll up pasta and cookies and biscuits and things, that is something that you could take with you in your bag and literally roll out your muscle tissue in between games to keep the tissue from getting so tight, help relieve lactic acid and get that back out into your bloodstream, and then stretching between games as well. Another thing you want to consider is hydration and diet. Bananas are a great snack after games, before games, to keep that potassium level high. Your muscles, when they contract and relax, they run on those nutrients like potassium to keep things going the way that you want them to. So staying properly hydrated and dieting appropriately are very important for that as well. But keeping the tissue mobilized between games, that's something that I do when I'm playing for hours on end with breaks in between games. I have a little roller thing that I like to roll my calves out, my quads, and the hamstrings and things, and just keep that tissue from tightening up like it wants to if you're using it a lot. I hope that answers your question. Absolutely, Rick. My pleasure. Anybody else got any questions about about anything, or if you want me to be more specific with something, feel free to just type it in there, and I'll be happy to get more specific if I can. I'll hang out here for a little bit longer. If anybody happens to think of anything else that they want to, feel free to shoot it in the comments section. This has been fun so far. And anybody that's asked me questions, if this advice that I've given you, you actually utilize it and implement it, and it helps you out, please let me know. That stuff makes me really happy. I like to hear those sort of things. Absolutely, Sally. Put it to use. Take it with you and use it. It's that a lot of people get those things and they don't know exactly how to use them or when to use them, and they end up just being stuck in the closet and not really taken out and used much. But take that thing out and use it on a regular basis. Get your money worth for it and then some. And I think you'll notice a pretty significant difference almost immediately if you use it on a regular basis, especially before and after games. That's the prime time to mobilize those tissues. Like I said, if you missed it, I will be putting together a video of a comprehensive, detailed, active warm-up for everybody to see on the kitchen later next week. And it's going to include everything that I mentioned, the low-level, sport-specific movements from head to toe. And I can guarantee that it's not going to take any longer than 5 to 10 minutes. And I can even more so guarantee that if you start implementing something like this in your pregame routine, not only will you play better, but I can guarantee that you will hurt less. It's well worth your time. Yes, sir, Brian. It's my pleasure. This is just one of many segments that I'm hoping to bring to you guys, and I appreciate the kitchen for having me in here and giving me the opportunity to do this. It's what I set out with the pickleball PT thing for in general, was to reach as many pickleball players as possible and keep them on the court. Like I said in that introductory video, I hate getting to people after they've already injured themselves and need my help at that point. I really want to get to people before they injure themselves, because most people don't realize they're at risk for injury until it's too late and it happens. So the more information I can spread to keep people out there on the courts and enjoying this beautiful game, the better. So I'm very, very grateful to Jared and Dane and the members of the kitchen for the opportunity to have this audience and platform and share this information with you guys. And I can only hope that it helps you out as much as it helps me out, and as much as it helps the patients out that I work with personally. Thank you guys for tuning in as well. Well, if we got no other questions or comments, I'll likely be wrapping it up. I'll give it another minute and a half and just see how things go, if anybody else tunes in and has any other questions. But this has been a good first start to this whole thing. I plan to bring to you guys throughout this series a variety of different segments on injury-specific topics like preventing and rehabilitating plantar fasciitis, knee pain, back pain, the tennis elbow or pickleball elbow, carpal tunnel syndrome, Achilles tendonitis, calf strains, hamstring pulls, all sorts of different common pickleball injuries, as well as improving performance like improving your squat ability, improving your lateral movement capacity, making sure you have more power in your overhead shots, more accuracy, and all those sort of things. All that can be done through fine-tuning how the body is functioning, and of course, drilling, practicing, getting out there and putting the work in to get better on a daily basis through practice. All right, Sally. Any special warm-ups for folks with joint replacements? Nothing particularly special. You just you want to make sure that the joints that you had replaced, that you're warming up, you want to be very deliberate in making sure that those particular joints get a lot of activity prior to going out there and playing. And if it's the knee, then you want to make sure you're doing a lot of movements being on your feet and bending and straightening the knee, like even just like a lot of pickleball courts have benches out there that people set their stuff on and hang out on between games. Even doing things like squatting down and sitting on the bench and standing back up, and squatting down and standing back up, and doing lateral movements and incorporating. Really, it's just, like I said, you can get very creative. Just mimic the movements that you're going to be doing out there on the pickleball court, but keep it at a lower intensity and make it continuous and make it last for about 5 to 10 minutes and really get the body moving in ways that you're going to be doing out there on the court, just not as intense, to get that body temperature up, to get those joints awakened, to get the tissues loosened up and get yourself ready to get out there and play. But you just want to make sure, especially if the joint has been replaced, that you are taking your time with it and giving it obviously the time that it needs to get warmed up, because it's going to be lagging behind other joints that obviously haven't been replaced. Thanks, Rick. I appreciate that. I hope they can too. I don't know the process behind all of that and how these live videos work. This is actually my first time really getting into doing live videos, so I'm learning just as much as you are. But I appreciate you taking the time to share it. I hope that whoever you shared it with gets something out of it as well. And I'm looking forward to, like I said, more of these in the coming months. You're welcome, Sally. Thank you for the questions. I appreciate you guys tuning in. And I'll be looking forward to other questions and comments as we go through all of this. Clubhouse room in the pickleball club. I'll look into that, Shane. First, I'm hearing about something like that, but I'll definitely look into it and see what it's all about and see what I can do. If it involves helping more people and spreading the word about how to play better and hurt less, I'm all for it. Yeah, that would be great. You can feel free to shoot me a message and kind of get me up to speed with all of that. And I will gladly take you up on the opportunity to share more of this information with more pickleball players. If anybody else has any questions, feel free to shoot them my way, but you don't have to think of them right now. You can literally, I think that this live video is going to get posted to the kitchen, so if you think of something 2 days from now or a week from now or whatever it might be, just write it back under the comments and I'll get it and I'll be able to address it at that point in time. This has been great. Thank you again to the kitchen for the opportunity to do this. And like I said, if you want this outline, just send me your email and I'll send it your way, that has all of those points that I covered, from the importance of an active warm-up and what an active warm-up actually looks like. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening and rest of the week. And I'm looking forward to part 2 of this Play Better, Hurt Less series in July. Thank you guys and have a great night.